Welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. In today's session, I'm going to be speaking to a gentleman's value. And this is simply one additional aspect to assessing a man's overall value. As a woman, there are certain things that should be considered when trying to choose a man for a long-term, emotionally significant relationship. And in choosing that man, there are several ways that a man's value can be assessed. I have covered over the past several sessions some topics relating to a man's value. And so in today's session, as I bring the overall process of assessing a man's value to a conclusion, I'm going to be speaking to the aspect that is not financially measured or sexually measured. It's not measured based on his productivity or his purpose or his character, but instead, whether he is a gentleman. I have called this GV, gentleman's value. I said in the sessions that I covered previously that we are all within the context of the classification of sex. We are all born male. We have to make ourselves into men, but we have to be cultivated, we have to be fine-tuned, we have to be crafted into becoming gentlemen. So as a woman, in choosing a man, what you're trying to ascertain is whether he has the potential to transition from being just a male and go past the boyhood phase and move into his manhood, and hopefully arrive at being a gentleman. The gentleman is more or less the pinnacle of a man's journey. We hope he gets to manhood and being a man, but we aspire to, and we shoot towards the ultimate place, which is being a gentleman. Going from being just a male to a man requires work. That work requires long hours of, you might say, study, training, sacrifice, dedication, grit, focus. But to become a gentleman, a man has to be crafted. Many years ago, centuries ago, those who were called gentlemen had to come from noble parents. These were people from, you might say, a lineage, a family history, family tree that was quite rich. By rich, I'm not referring to financial wealth. I'm referring to rich in the sense of well-traveled, well-read, well-studied, very well-cultured, awareness of things around the world. These were men who were more or less, you might say, polymaths. They understood several subjects. And they were very, very well-crafted. They understood how things worked. In today's society, we no longer have that level of a class society, especially in the UK, but we still have remnants of that. In any case, what we have had the opportunity over the past 40, 50, 60 years is to level the playing field, where education is now available to everyone. Access to wealth, access to study, access to whatever you desire can be bought by anyone within reason, especially in the West. Therefore, the task of journeying from just being a man to being a gentleman has been within reach. So as a woman, in trying to choose a man who you will commit to, pair bond with for the long term, it's important you look for qualities, attributes, virtues that give you an indication that he is a gentleman or he intends to transition towards being a gentleman. Now the key question therefore is, what do I mean by being a gentleman? Irrespective of where you are in the world, irrespective of your, you might say, religious affiliations, there is a best fit line that cuts through people irrespective of their moral position or religious position or convictions or value system. That best fit line is called superior standard. A gentleman is simply a man who has superior standards. He has superior standards of good conduct, candor, superior standards of communication, behavior, social decorum, intellectual refinement. Within his peers, he has the spirit of being gentle. That in many ways is what I call a gentleman. Now let me make it very clear. I'm not saying that you should choose a man who has all of those qualities, but is a peewee in many ways. And partly what we tend to find is, many of you may have heard me talk about the fact that most men, since the 1960s and even pre the 1960s, they were feminized. And so you find men who are actually very soft, and men who were taught sometimes to even pee sitting down, to put in a pictorial sense. These were men who were taught just to express their emotions and do not understand and reject any form that relates to the inherent biology of men. I'm not referring to any of that. As a matter of fact, I'm talking about a man who has culture, who's cultured, but who understands the power of honor. Honor and duty, obligation, sacrifice. These were men back in the day who were, now go back in time, gentlemen were those who commanded the highest positions in society with regards to adjudication, the legal system or law, and actually protecting the nation. These were men who, with the kings and the noble knights and barons, they were at the forefront of the war. They stood in front, ahead of everyone else. Why? They had skin in the game. As such, these men were trained, sophisticatedly trained in the art of war, the art of using weaponry, how to fight, and they did not shy away from an invitation to a duel. These were men who could walk into a room and charm the entire room filled with women. Very kind, spoke very kindly both to men and women. But at the moment the trumpet was sounded, indicating that there was the presence of enemies, foreign, these men got chained very quickly, and to the battlefield they went. And they died for country, nation, family, and honor. So I'm not referring to weak men like we see in the West these days. Men who, I'll give you a classic example. I'm aware of someone who sends his Mrs., significant other, downstairs to check the doors whenever there is noise or interference, where both of them believe that someone has intruded. As in, think about that. Your duty is to provide and protect, fundamentally. But when it comes to providing and protecting, you delegate the responsibility of protecting to the woman. I'm not referring to such men. I'm referring to men who have honor, who have a culture, who have a controlled focus, who have attention to detail, men who have gone through the process of fine-tuning what I call the ABCD of their self-image. And perhaps gentlemen epitomize the concept of self-image. A stands for appearance and attitude. This is a man who dress well, who present themselves very stylishly. Doesn't have to be wealthy, it doesn't have to be expensive outfit, but they dress well. Their shoes are polished, their clothes are clean, and therefore when you meet them, what you see is an image of someone whose appearance you would be happy to have with you and who you would be happy to be associated with. So their appearance and their attitude was amongst the best among society. They understood how to have a good attitude, a positive mental attitude. B, behavior. They understood how to conduct themselves. In a place where it was business, you conducted yourself like a businessman, but in a gentle way. In the marketplace, you understood how to communicate and converse respectfully with people you disagreed with. These are people who didn't switch, who understood how to control their emotions and didn't switch from being masculine into feminine. As a matter of fact, what you find is in the United States or in the UK, in London, whenever you see young boys who either use guns or who use knives. These are people who were not trained to be men. There were also people who were not crafted and groomed and polished to be gentlemen, because otherwise you don't behave in a certain manner, because that's equivalent to being an animal. Most of these men you see on the streets who rage and act in ways that we find appalling were boys who were not trained on how to control their emotions. These are boys who were feminized, and at the moment there is an aggression that comes from within, that erupts. They don't know how to express that, how to control that, how to quench that flame of burning anger. Gentlemen have been trained on how to control their emotions. C, communication. How do you communicate with people? Does he communicate clearly? Does he communicate directly? Does he communicate with purpose? Now, my mentor many years ago said that as a speaker, you should always keep two things in mind. Number one, speak to be understood, not to be heard. Gentlemen know how to communicate, to be understood, not just to use big words to be heard. They spoke in such a way that people understood and understood what they were saying. Now, my mentor also said, number two, when you speak to people, understand that there is always a difference between what they hear and what you're saying. And you as a speaker have to know how to transcend. This is something I personally do very poorly, by the way, but you have to learn how to transcend and be a listener and critique whether what you're saying is being received in the right way, irrespective of what is being said and where it's being said and when it is being said. So A, B, C, D, appearance and attitude, behavior, communication. D deals with discipline. Gentlemen are disciplined men. These are people who look after their physical well-being, work hard, have the discipline to ensure that they can achieve their dreams and goals. E, empathy. You can be a gentleman, but if you lack empathy, then it means you cannot put yourself in another person's shoes. And so in choosing men as women, you have to connect with whether a man empathizes with other people. Now, there is a huge divide in this whole thing about empathy. For the past 70 years, we have feminized the West, so much so that empathy is read through the prism of a woman's emotions. Women are generally, when they have children, more empathetic because they understand the emotions that a child might be going through. However, the data suggests the fathers create better children with empathy than mothers do. In other words, the offsprings raised by only fathers are more empathetic than offsprings raised by only mothers, primarily because the way we emote and teach children how to empathize is much better than how women teach boys or girls how to empathize. A woman generally tells you what not to do and talks about emotions and feelings, whereas a father introduces things such as boundary enforcement, rough and tumble play, risk-taking, drawing your attention to the rules of the game. He sets the boundaries, he enforces the boundaries, and as a result, what that does is it teaches the child how to consider the other party if they want to continue the relationship or a game. And that teaches empathy much better than just telling the child what to do. Gentlemen are men who know how to fight, who know how to use weapons. And I have said this in many occasions. It is important for young men to learn how to fight on their feet and on the ground. Choose a form of martial arts, boxing, learn how to use your hands, karate, hands and legs, taekwondo, hands, or any other form of martial arts, standing. But on the ground, you have to learn how to grapple, how to wrestle, jiu-jitsu, or any other form of, you might say, ground martial arts that enables you not to be disadvantaged if you find yourself off the ground. You have to learn how to be a gentleman of battle. Now, this brings me to the next point, which is, when I talk about the ability to learn how to fight, I'm going back to the whole idea of protection. You do not deserve anything you're not willing to protect. As a matter of fact, the first instinct, the first directive, the first order that we have as men is that whatever we are given, whether that is a small garden, whether that be a small nation, whether that be a small room, we are supposed to guard, protect, defend, bring out the best in our small environment. That is our first charge. We're supposed to bring out the best of what we have. We're supposed to nurture what we have. We're supposed to provide for what we have, and we're supposed to protect what we have. And a man who does not know how to protect is a man you should stay away from. Now, I know, and I know in the West, we're civilized. We're not fighting each other. As a matter of fact, gentlemen know when to walk away from fights and when to stand their grounds. Reason being, they understand and they've calibrated both their knuckles, their minds, and their physique in such a way that a man understands his limitations. A man who does not understand his limitations will always come to a short end. Now, I say this simply because there are women who choose men, and the man may be a great fighter, could be a national champion in something, but if he has not controlled how to manage his emotions, then it means he cannot choose intelligently between battles. There are battles worth fighting for. There are other battles that are not worth fighting for. In a woman choosing a man, she has to make sure that she's choosing a man who is disciplined enough to understand, read the tea leaves, and recognize when a battle is worthy of fighting for, and when you should approach what could be an obstacle, an encounter, with intelligence, not with brute force. You have to calculate and be calculated. Now, this brings me to the point about emotional control and temperament. Gentlemen have good temperament. Now, one of my favorite books talks about the word meekness. Meekness is seen by most people as weakness. No. The meek shall inherit the earth doesn't mean the weak. As a matter of fact, the translation is actually a horse that has been trained, a battle horse that has been trained, and can be controlled by even the smallest person. Why? All of that power has been harnessed, managed, and controlled in such a positive way that it doesn't lash out. Those who have their shield but keep them sheath is a translation for meekness. The meek shall inherit the earth. Those who have their swords, rather, not their shields. Those who have their swords but keep them sheath. In other words, warriors are very slow to pulling out their swords. Why? They understand that sometimes some battles are not worthy of having. And when the battle begins, it has to be drawn to its natural conclusion. So I would simply say, in summary, there is a reference to a word called filial piety. I would recommend you look up that word, filial piety. It comes from the Confucian teachings. And what it espouses is most of what I have shared so far today. This is a different culture, different continent, but a similar mindset about what a gentleman should be. It talks about the moral duty of a man and the moral duty of a gentleman, and how there is a superior expectation on a man who is a gentleman because he's supposed to be more refined, someone who is educated, someone who is well-read, someone who is street smart. And let me conclude by saying this. Gentlemen historically used to be those who were the most educated. I'm going to address three things: educated men, well-read men, and street smart men. If I had to choose from the three, I would choose a well-read man first. Then I would choose a man who has got street smartness second, and then educated. Most people who are educated are not necessarily intelligent. So I'm not referring to assessing a man based on his education. He might have a BSc, BA, an MSc, an MBA. Those are simply certifications that he was taught how to use his memory, and he was able to demonstrate the good use of that memory and pass certain exams. It doesn't mean he's actually developed his intellectual faculties or the rest of his faculties of his mind, and therefore can, with your help, achieve a combined dream or goal that both of you will share. Can he reason? Has he developed his ability to use his imagination? Does he have willpower and the ability to control his will? His memory may have been developed, and therefore he has qualifications and he's been educated formally. But does he understand the power of perception? Does he understand how to use his intuition? I would choose a man who is more well-read, because a man who is well-read would have had the opportunity to go inwards and through his imagination to places where he could not go with his feet. When you read well, you gain, through other people's experiences, opportunities that your imagination can work with. You're able to expand your dreams. You're able to understand that people are different. So, for example, you're not picking up or choosing confrontation simply because you don't understand the word. But if you're well read, as a matter of fact, there's a correlation between the number of words we have in our vocabulary and the tendency that we will be involved in some form of bad behavior or antisocial behavior. The men in prison have the lowest level of vocabularies. Why? Words enable you to interpret the world and express yourself. And what tends to happen is the less words you have, the harder it is for you to express yourself to the world or interpret what is coming to you from the world. Gentlemen have been trained. Many of them are well educated. I'm not saying anything wrong about a man who is educated, but understand that it's better to have a man who is well read and who has a passion for learning, because therefore he becomes a good leader, especially with regards to his priestly duties. But more importantly, a man who is well read has, in many ways, a humility that comes in recognizing how little he knows and how much more is out there. And a leader who is humble is a leader that you should choose as a woman, because he will become a servant leader by being aware of the fact that he is not all that, and there is so much more he doesn't know. He will seek men who are wiser than he is, more knowledgeable than he is, older than he is, more accomplished than he is, for good counsel. A man might be educated, but proud of his education, and therefore locked in a mindset, a closed mindset rather than a growth mindset. Now, I hope all of that has been useful. Now, let me conclude by saying as follows. As a woman, you can choose a man based on his gentleman's value. You can assess a man to say, well, does he have behaviors such as chivalry, good ways of communicating, an appropriate behavior? Does he have the right etiquette? Was he trained in his value system? Does he communicate and converse in the right manner, the right candor, the right conduct, and whether he has overall superior standards compared to other men? All men are not the same. You can place men together in a room and you can lead them. In a short while, what you'll find is that the men will rank themselves in a hierarchy of gentlemen, who they consider to be gentlemen. It's not based on how they speak. It's not based on how they communicate by the use of words only. It's more a holistic approach, something that connects everything that I have shared so far. There is embedded in the filial piety reference that I mentioned is that moral duty that transcends just yourself. Now, I should have said this earlier. Why is this important? Well, the data has come in and the data is conclusive that the intelligence of the mother and the intelligence of the father are paramount in determining the intelligence of the child. So as a woman, you're looking for a man who is intelligent, not just educated, intelligent, well-read, street smart, open to learning more, rather than educated but closed-minded. Because by pair bonding, the man is the first teacher of the culture of the family, the mission of the family, the vision of the family. A man who is not a gentleman and who is not well skilled and who has not been allowed himself to be open to all of these ideas, a man who has not transitioned from just being a man and crafting himself, fine-tuning himself to being a gentleman, you will find, in many cases, will fail in the same standards set for other men who are gentlemen. And therefore, by not putting the man through the same standards, of rigor. I'm simply choosing him based on economics only, rather than saying, no, I'm choosing someone for the long term. I like someone who I can go out to a social event with and he presents himself very well. The man is a spitting image and a representation of you as a woman, just in the same way that the woman is a spitting image and a representation of her husband or her boyfriend or her partner. I have met women who, within meeting them in a few seconds or minutes, I never had a desire to meet their husbands, primarily because of how they communicated, how they behaved, how they dressed and appeared. I've also met men who, within a few minutes of meeting them, I had no desire to meet their wives or their significant others. Why? Similarly, because of how they behaved. Very loud, not cultured, lacking in social decorum, lacking in social etiquette, not having any candor, not having any conduct for self, no respect for self, no understanding how to be delicate and gentle with regards to social settings. And he reflects his wife or his missus the same way as she reflects his. So in choosing a man, pay attention to his gentleman's value.